paying attention, these people are all screaming from the hilltops that the current system is very likely on its last legs and is showing severe signs of exhaustion. And I think they're very, very well up the curve on the extreme mismanagement in terms of stewardship that the elites in our current monetary order have exercised. And frankly, the rise of the cryptoverse also is, in my view, evidence that alternatives are being tested, tried, and being put in place to hopefully have alternatives when this current system finally falls onto its own sword.
Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Rob Kirby. Rob is the creator and owner of KirbyAnalytics.com, and I am very happy to have Rob back on the X22 Report Spotlight. Rob, welcome back to the Spotlight.
Pleasure to be with you again. Good man.
Yes, thank you for coming back on here. And I wanted to talk about the economy because the Fed just raised the rates once again, and I wanted to get your take on where the economy is headed with them raising the rates. And of course, they're talking about December raising the rates once again. And I wanted to get your take on the economy, precious metals. What does this mean for both of those, the precious metals and the economy?
Well, in the context of rising rates, what we've mostly seen in the interest rate complex, Dave, is a flattening of the yield curve. And to be honest, I haven't looked at the yield on the 10-year bond today, but I know yesterday at the close it was at 305. Down from a very, very recent high last week of, I think, 311, or maybe that was earlier this week. But while short-term rates have admittedly been nudging up, long-term rates essentially are unchanged, or at least have not gone up in a pronounced way. That being said, the 10-year rate is higher than it was at this time last year when the Fed funds rate was substantially lower. So that in itself, to me anyway, Dave, raises more questions than it answers, because if you look at the amount of new debt that America has issued in the last year, the amount's roughly $1.4 trillion in new debt. The yield on the 10-year bond 1 year ago was around about 231, and today we're at 305. Which means that that's close to a 70 basis point increase in the 10-year yield, if you want to use that as a proxy for the longer end. And 70 basis points on a base of 230 is a little more than, or very, very close actually, to a 30% decrease in the value of a 10-year bond in the last year. And a 30% decrease on a face amount of 1.4 trillion gives you a loss of something in the magnitude of $430 billion in loss. So bonds, 1.4 trillion worth of bonds in 1 year has seen a decrease in its worth to the tune of $430 billion. So if somebody has taken a $430 billion loss on their bonds, I haven't seen anything in the news about anyone taking a loss that big, or even remotely that big. So my question, what it really comes back to, Dave, who the heck has bought all these bonds? Because the other queer thing we do know for a fact, that America's traditional financiers, as in the people who buy most American debt, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Russians, the Sauds, these guys aren't buying the debt. So people should be asking themselves, who is buying the debt? And I think if you have the ability to connect some very, very basic dots, and to think in macro terms, there's at least in my mind anyway, there's unquestionably a tie-in to the missing 21 trillion that's been widely reported and evidenced by Dr. Mark Skidmore, PhD economist at Michigan State University, and his work in conjunction with Catherine Austin Fitts, former Undersecretary of HUD, who have, using the government's own financial reporting, identified a missing or unaccounted for $21 trillion from the Department of Defense and HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Agency of the U.S. government. So within two agencies over about a 17-year period, they've identified a minimum of 21 trillion bucks that's gone into the ether. Well, the definition, at least in economic parlance in my world, the definition of ether is the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the secretive adjunct of the U.S. Treasury that operates above all laws, is accountable to no one, and doesn't produce financials. So to me, it's not a big stretch to think that all or a very substantial portion of this missing 21 trillion has found its way into the black box known as the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or ESF. And there's no doubt, at least in my mind, that these resources have been used or been marshaled up to basically solve the problem of foreigners dumping U.S. debt. And at least in my books, it makes a whole lot of sense that this debt is being bought, monetized, and memory holed by the U.S. Treasury itself. So while people might very well and rightfully be able to say that the Fed has not been conducting QE and may even be reducing their balance sheet by meager amounts, the notion that nobody's engaged in QE is an even bigger stretch, because we've seen the traditional financiers of America. They've been absent from the, let's just say, the debt auctions now for going on close to 2 years. And America's been issuing record amounts of debt, and rates really haven't backed up far enough, at least in my mind, to if let's just say there's an unseen hand that's buying debt to keep it where it is. And it also goes a long way to explain how the dollars remain, let's just say in air quotes, strong. Because when the world is dumping your debt, you wouldn't necessarily expect that to be a backdrop for a strong currency. And the world has been dropping American debt left, right, and center. And the dollar has strengthened. And that, to me, is also very, very evidentiary that there's an unseen hand engaged in a very macro way. So anyway, that's kind of sort of where my head's at and what I think is going on.
So you think the ESF, the missing 21 trillion, this was put aside to keep the economy operational?
Well, listen, the 21 trillion was put aside because the people at the Fed and the Treasury, who model everything, and they're very aware of what the life cycle of fiat money is. And if anybody wants to go and Google the name Chris Martenson, who's probably appeared on your show at least once and probably more than that.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to Google Chris Martenson and the Crash Course, on Martenson's website, he has quite a nice little mini documentary which explains in I believe it's in a YouTube format. It explains the life cycle of fiat money. And what it shows is the amount of money that must be created in a fiat money system with compound interest. It explains and shows and demonstrates how the growth rate of the money supply starts off very gently sloping upward to the right, but it reaches an inflection point where it hockey sticks and it goes vertical. And when a fiat money regime, when it hits this inflection point and goes vertical, it means the money supply has to grow at a vertical rate or it collapses onto itself. And it's my sincere and honest belief that we are on that vertical growth part of the growth curve now. And the people, these alchemists, these Keynesian alchemists at the Federal Reserve who model everything and who have wargamed everything, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that they've modeled this and they've known in advance when they were going to inflect and knew they were going to inflect and knew that the money supply would have to grow vertically. And rather than trying to steal or create the money in dribs and drabs along the way to satisfy this vertical demand part of the growth curve for the fiat money, they've effectively created huge batches of it, and they've siloed it, and they use it, and they marshal these resources up on an as-needed basis for the inevitable rebuffment by major players. There's no doubt in my mind that they knew that the debt had to grow at a vertical rate. There's no doubt in my mind that they wouldn't have had foreknowledge that foreigners who formerly held the debt would be aware that there's something wrong and would start to abandon the debt. And, by having these extra 21 or maybe the number isn't really 21 trillion, maybe as Catherine Austin Fitts has opined, she feels that the number might be a lot more than 21 trillion. She feels it could be 50 or more trillion. And because understand that the in-depth work that Skidmore and his research team, more PhD level economists at his research staff at Michigan State, along with Catherine's work, they've only done their homework on 2 government agencies. And when they first posted their results, they had links back to the raw government data. The first thing the government did, and the Department of Defense in particular did, was they deadened the links to basically mean that, people couldn't go back and verify that this is indeed what the government own financial reporting had posted. And then as recently as this August, as reported by Catherine Fitts, the U.S. government has now, after initially back in December ordering a complete audit, unheard of audit of the Department of Defense, they've in August they've gone ahead and classified this whole situation, which basically means we're never going to be shown any transparent results on the investigation, the government investigating itself, which basically means that we're never going to see a true accounting of what has occurred here, which basically means, again, that the U.S. government is no longer subject to accounting, period. So, this is the state of affairs. And if there was nothing to hide, and if there was nothing nefarious going on here, would the government have canceled accounting?
Let me just ask you this. You were talking about the auditing of Defense Department. Now, did the auditors, they're the ones who decided that we needed to classify this?
Well, what the auditors said was, if we give a transparent accounting, we could be revealing classified information, means and methods, and that was used as a justification to classify all of this, and effectively it's basically it creates a dead end. Basically, it's like saying go away. We're not going to give you an accounting for the missing 21 trillion, period.
Because most likely it was a lot more than that. That's what I'm thinking. And this is why they didn't want anyone to see, the whole accounting, the books. They didn't want anyone to see it.
Well, basically what they're saying is nobody's ever going to see the books now. There are no books. There are no books to see.
I wanted to go back to the fiat system, which you were mentioning, that we're on this curve. For those people who don't know, how long does a fiat system usually last?
35-ish years, which means that we were taken off the gold standard in 1971, August of 71, count ahead 35 years. That puts you at 2006. And geez, isn't it funny? Isn't that roundabout when we had a financial crisis? And that was papered over with an official rendition of QE.
If we're on that part of the curve that's going vertical, I mean, how much longer can this go on then?
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question to answer your question, because how long, when you see something in the financial universe that goes absolutely straight up, how sustainable is something that's going straight up?
It's not at all.
Well, we know that, don't we?
Yeah.
And I mean, if we look at money growth as reported by the St. Louis Federal Reserve, who is the keeper of the monetary aggregate data for the Federal Reserve System, if we look at monetary aggregate data, we see that the growth in the monetary base is, more or less like a curve that goes up at a pretty steep angle upward to the right. But you see that accounting of the monetary base is not including a minimum of an extra 21 trillion that's been covertly created and hidden. And all I'm going to say is, if you add the extra 21 trillion to the existing data that is reported, you'd have a curve that was going vertically straight up. And that, to me, is what reality really is. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, why the Federal Reserve has absolutely avoided an audit and lobbied against ever having an audit. The way a vampire resists sunshine, mirrors, and garlic.
So when we get to the end of a fiat system, what does that actually mean for those people who are trying to understand this?
When we get to the end of a fiat system, people that were formerly in the fiat system would be naturally, one would assume, would be trying to create an alternative system that would be hopefully up and ready to go when the existing system collapses. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we've been witnessing for the past, 5, 6, 7, or 8 years. We've seen China and the BRIC countries building parallel structures to emulate, existing structures in our dollar-centric system. Heck, it was 3 weeks ago now, the German foreign minister stated publicly that Europe needs an alternative system to the US-centric SWIFT system. They need to develop a new system of their own. Dave, if you're paying attention, these people are all screaming from the hilltops that the current system is very likely on its last legs and is showing severe signs of exhaustion. And I think they're very, very well up the curve on the extreme mismanagement in terms of stewardship that the elites in our current monetary order have exercised. And frankly, the rise of the cryptoverse also is, in my view, evidence that alternatives are being tested, tried, and being put in place to hopefully have alternatives when this current system finally falls onto its own sword. And in my view, it's absolutely not a question of if; it's only a question of when. And I'll just tell you, the current monetary order, in my view, is extremely long in the tooth.
You mentioned in precious metals and cryptocurrency, and we've been seeing the same thing happen to cryptocurrency that happens to precious metals, where with precious metals, they take paper contracts and they throw it at it and they bring the price down. And what they're doing with cryptocurrency, especially with Bitcoin, they're just taking a whole bunch of Bitcoin, throwing it out there and bringing the price down. Was this done on purpose to the crypto market like they've done with the precious metals market?
People that I talk to and interact with have given me very, very strong reason to believe that the U.S. government has been a big player in the run-up in the cryptos. It's my understanding that the U.S. government, or at least agencies within the U.S. government, have acquired and do own very substantial amounts of Bitcoin. Were players in the big run-up in 2017, and So it's not like these guys don't have any ammunition if they wanted to create a waterfall event to knock the price down. And I do believe that it's very likely a big amount of that was in play back in last December when Bitcoin topped out at plus $19,000 a coin. I think the existing monetary order became very, very concerned and very, very worried that the run-up in the cryptos was becoming manic. And they felt that they had to intervene and reduce the price, much like they became very, very concerned when silver went on its manic tear back in 2011 and approached $50. And we had them intervene on a Sunday night, and they dropped the price $8 in about a minute on a Sunday night back in May of 2011. And that is something that I had referred to back at the time as a drive-by shooting in the silver market. I think we witnessed another drive-by shooting in the Bitcoin market in December of 2017. But I do believe that going forward, we will see cryptos rise again. Cryptocurrencies are not going away. And cryptocurrencies, in my view, will be a much more robust aspect of our monetary affairs in 5 years than they are today. But I would only offer this, Dave. I'm not endorsing or saying that one crypto or another specifically is going to be the one. It's sort of like back in the heyday of the internet boom in the late 90s, we saw a number of formerly venerable internet companies like AOL, MySpace, Nortel. Anyway, these were all high-flying tech companies that basically crashed to the ground. And which cryptos are going to be the Amazons, the Apples of the future, I'm not willing to bet just yet. I mean, there are some that we might suspect could be the chosen ones. Bitcoin might be one of them. Ethereum might be one of them. Litecoin might be one of them. But I mean, I wouldn't want to be putting all my chips on any of them quite yet, because I do think that there's we're going through a maturation process, and it's just that we knew back in 2000 that the internet was a revolutionary platform. I think blockchain is a revolutionary methodology that can be applied in so many ways. Going forward, it's hard to say which adaptation of that, emerging methodology is going to be the winner.
Do you think when we hit the end of this fiat cycle, do you think that there's going to be another reserve currency, or do you think there'll be many different currencies? Because Russia's been out there and they've been saying and they've been pushing for countries to use their national currencies. Well,
listen, I don't think the dollar is going to completely disappear off the map, but I think what my common sense, if I have any, is telling me is that the dollar might be restricted a lot more to domestic American trade, where internationally, I can envision a day when internationally dollars will not be taken in settlement for international trade. I do believe that we're going to see the dollar displaced as the chief reserve currency unit, and whether the new reserve currency unit is crypto based or has a crypto aspect to it or not, I can't say for sure, but I do believe that whatever comes along next as a as a medium for international a settlement of international trade will certainly have a link to something tangible. And it might end up being a basket of tangibles that has a metals, precious metals component, maybe an agri component, maybe an energy component. But I do believe that the dollar stays as the preeminent settlement currency is coming to an end.
So when this does all come to an end, I mean, the people in the United States, we've been living in a world of we're the reserve currency and we're living much higher than many other countries. Is this going to change quite a bit, or is it going to stay the same?
Well, basically what it's going to mean is the fraudulently created off-book dollars that we were talking about earlier, the 21 trillion in dark money that's been created fraudulently, or maybe much more than that. I feel that could turn into tapioca overnight, and that could ignite or incite a very, very, very stiff round of inflation in America that might be something Zimbabwe-esque or Venezuelan-esque or Iranian-esque. These are all countries that are experiencing hyperinflation right now. And, when fiat money fails, we know this because when the Roman Empire fell, a very large component of the Roman Empire falling was because the currency was debased through such things as coin clipping, the removal of precious from the coins, and the inclusion of more base metal. And the Roman Empire, the decline was first felt at the extremities. It's sort of like when your body starts to shut down from a weak heart. It's the malady is felt first in the far extremities of the body, in the toes, the feet. It's like if you know anybody who's suffered debilitating effects of diabetes, something I'm very familiar with. People lose circulation in their toes and in their extremities. In an international context, the extremities are the Venezuelas, they're the Irans, they're the Greeces, they're the Italys. These are entities at the far extremes of the sphere of American hegemony, and they are experiencing the pain first. But as the system continues to rot, it rots from the extremities back to the whole. And I do believe that we're going to see a time when a lot of dollars come home because a lot of foreigners are very aware of the hijinks that have been committed by the conservators or the guardians of the stewards of the world's reserve currency.
Right now we see the mainstream media, and we're talking about the end of the fiat system, and the mainstream media, I've been seeing it quite often now, where they're putting out articles where, they're saying a recession is coming. Of course, everyone's citing the yield curve flattening or inverting, and they're saying that this is going to hit maybe in 2019 or the end of 2019. They've never said this during Obama. They said, everything is great. And of course, Trump is saying, look at our GDP numbers, look at our unemployment. And we know these are manipulated, but there's two opposite things happening right now. And I feel like they switched, because back when Obama was president, the mainstream media was out there telling us how great it was. And the alternative media was saying, no, this isn't real. It's all fake, manipulated numbers. Now the mainstream media is saying that we might be headed towards a recession in 2019, 2020. And, Trump is out there saying that the economy is looking great. Why the flip-flop? What is happening? And we just talked about the fiat system coming to an end. So what is going on here?
Well, what's going on here? In my view, Dave, the dollar isn't strong, but it looks strong. The dollar looks strong because dark money has been mobilized to make declining fortunes in the creditworthiness of the U.S. globally has diminished dramatically. And that is evidenced factually by foreigners dumping their caches of U.S. government debt. And that's a process that's been ongoing now for two plus years. And, when foreigners are abandoning your currency, but your currency continues for the time being to be used in international trade, and you have a dramatically huge amount of dark money siloed in very difficult to see entities like the ESF. Well, you can fool people for a while, and make the dollar on paper look strong. But the reality is, if you're monetizing your own debt, if you're secretly and covertly buying your own bonds, this is not a picture of strength. And the amount of money that's being pumped into the system is very, very much evidenced, at least in my view, why we see record prices in the equity market. We see there are some people that say that the dollar's strong because there's a dollar liquidity problem in the world. And interestingly, I was having this discussion with Mark Skidmore this past week. And what I said to him was, because he put forward the idea that the dollar is strong because there's dollar liquidity issues in the world. Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think when you have, for the most part, record real estate prices around the world, when you have record equity prices pretty much around the world, when you have record prices being paid for fine art, autos, and collectibles, basically anything that doesn't have a futures market attached to it, record prices and all these things, this is not what you'd expect as a backdrop for a dollar liquidity crisis. This, to me, is evidence of there being too many dollars in the system, because the dollars are looking for outlets, and they're looking for there's so much hot money in the system, and it's looking for a place to park itself. And as we know, by foreign reluctance to buy U.S. government debt, it isn't wanting to go into fixed income, because everyone knows, or everyone's been of the belief, at least for the past couple of years, that rates were going higher, and bonds aren't the place to have your money invested if rates are very likely to back up. So this also explains and gives ammunition to the rationale that these bonds that people are dumping around the world for good reason are being monetized. So you see, I don't believe that we have a dollar liquidity issue at all. I think there are too many dollars, and that's evidenced by, in the real world, record prices being paid for virtually everything, except, of course, precious metal, because the nominal prices of precious metal on exchanges have been crushed and have been held at multi-year lows, with the vast inflation of open interest, as evidenced on the COMEX in particular, where we've seen obscene builds in open interest on both silver and gold. And what it is they're curtailing. Precious metals historically have served as, they call it, the canary in the coal mine. When you have a dramatically rising price of precious metal, it's a signal that there's a problem with the underlying money, and that's a message that the that the stewards of the world's reserve currency do not want communicated to the general public. But that also is that rigging scheme also is a very expensive, in fiat terms, program to maintain, which is another primary use of all this dark money that's been siloed in the likes of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And for people who think that this is, not plausible, I would only remind you that it was back when Blythe Masters was running the commodities area of JP Morgan And JP Morgan is widely been reported to be a massive short player in the precious metals derivatives area, and a serial shorter of precious metals. And it was Blythe Masters who herself said JP Morgan doesn't take positions for their own book in any commodities. They only take positions of clients. And the question, the real important question that no one ever put to her was, is your client the Exchange Stabilization Fund or the U.S. government or the U.S. Treasury specifically? Because this undoubtedly is exactly what's been transpiring. And the relationship between the Fed, the Treasury, and the commercial banks in the commodity space is, when the ESF enters the market, the routing of orders goes from the ESF to the Federal Reserve, and specifically the New York Federal Reserve Trading Desk, who acts as the sole and exclusive broker of the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And then the orders are then parroted or passed on to the commercial banks or the bank holding companies from the Federal Reserve. So that's the routing of the orders. And, it actually, if you sit down and think about it, and if you think in terms of who benefits, the squelching of the prices of precious metals allows the U.S. Treasury to maintain their long adopted policy of being committed to a strong dollar, or at least a dollar that appears strong. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is exactly what's been being played out now for a good number of years, hiding in plain sight, Dave.
So when the fiat system comes to an end, and this manipulation, I guess, will have to come to an end, I mean, is precious metals, is it still going to be $1,100 or $1,200 for gold and $14 for silver?
Not in my wildest dreams would I expect that to occur, Dave. I believe that there's going to be a reset on the price of precious metals. I've long said, Dave, that I do believe we will reach a day when you cannot buy an ounce of gold for any amount of fiat money, as we know fiat money today. So I'm thinking in terms of prices on precious metals being extremely many more multiples of what they currently are in nominal terms.
Well, if that's true, then that makes sense now, because, we've been seeing China and Russia purchasing a huge amount of gold, and, they're buying it very, very cheaply right now. And if this holds true, what you're saying, they are going to be set then with all the gold reserves that they have.
That would be my thinking.
And I'm going to ask this question. What about the United States? Do we have as much gold as everyone is saying?
I don't believe so. But America does have the most powerful military in the world, and that still counts for something.
Rob, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
You can catch me on the web at kirbyanalytics.com.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dave.